Hey everybody, just want to welcome you to Week 10, Module 10 for ME 171, Design of Elements. Within this module here, we're going to be covering the topics from Chapter 10 and Chapter 11 in our textbook, looking at screws, fasteners, rivets, welding, and bonding. So within this module, we do have our quiz number 10. This has been posted to Blackboard and will be due by Friday at 4 p.m. And a reminder, as always, I do have my office hours scheduled for Thursdays after class from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Now, if this time doesn't work for you, just send me a chat, a message, or an email, and we'll find a time that works for both of us. Also, the TA has office hours scheduled on Wednesdays from 10 to 11:30 a.m. This is a great opportunity if you have any questions related to homework, exams, or grading. The TA is the one who's doing the grading, so this would be an opportunity to chat with him about that. Now let's take a look at our course schedule for the rest of the semester. We can see we're down here in our Module 10, Week 10 here. We've highlighted this in yellow, again, covering those chapters 10 and 11 in our textbook, topics of screws and fasteners, rivets, and welding. And we can see also, beginning of this week, your homework number 4 was due. That was turned in on Monday. And then we can see we have coming up, you do have your homework 5 coming up the following week. And also your 5-page outline is coming up that following week as well. We've discussed that, so make sure to get together with your group and start that. It'll be a group submission through Blackboard as well. And the thing to note here is the 15th, this is a reading and respite day that UVM has given us, so there will be no live lecture on April 15th on Thursday. I will still have everything posted as normal to Blackboard for you guys as far as the PDF lectures and some example videos as well, but there will be no class or no new material covered during the live lecture time on the 11th. This is the time to catch up, take a breath, and relax before we jump into the rest of the semester and our second exam, which brings us up to here in Module 12. We will have our exam number 2 scheduled that week as well during our class time on that Thursday, the 22nd. So then after that, we're going to get into our last couple chapters here, 15 and 17, covering gears and shafts. And as I mentioned before, we're likely to move up our shafts with our gear section right here. That way it'll give us plenty of time to cover our presentations and have at least the last 3 class time periods for your presentations of your final group project. And recall, our group projects will be due not at the end of the semester, but before your presentations here within this week of Module 13. So as we get into our Module 10, again, we're covering the topics of screws, fasteners, rivets, welding, and bonding. Now within this module, what we're going to do is we're going to analyze the design of bolts and some other fasteners and take a look at their specifications. Now oftentimes there are going to be requirements for these specifications. We want them to be lighter, cheaper to manufacture, easier to use, less susceptible to corrosion, resistant to vibration. So we'll go through the design of how we cover that, as well as some of the testing for those as well, and what we need to look for, how we can make them better, how we can design them better. And again, sometimes we have that trade-off. How can we make it cheaper, lighter, and better, more resistant to corrosion? Failing at higher rates. All of those things we'll talk about within the design process there, and I'll focus a little bit on some testing that I did for some failure analysis as well. Then we're also going to take a look at fastener choices that are available and apply some of the basic principles and equations, looking at stress and loads. Again, so we'll go back to our stress strain curves related to some screw testing as well. So within this chapter, what we're going to take a look at is thread forms, terminology, and standards. So there are a lot of standards that we can look at and relate back to, especially within the design process. Talk about power screws and some practical applications of those. Static screw stresses, fastener types and materials. Talk about bolts. Within bolts, talk about tightening, tension, and selection. Look at rivets, different types of rivets, applications, and materials that those are made of. Talk about the welding process. Talk about brazing and soldering. And then you can do a little bit on adhesives as well. So this relates back to chapters 10 and chapters 11. Within your textbook. So we'll break this module down into 2 different sections again, Module 10.1 and Module 10.2. In Module 10.1, this is where we're covering Chapter 10 in our textbook, taking a look at threaded fasteners and power screws. So within this here, we'll look at those thread forms, different types of power screws, talk about static screw stresses, look at different types of fasteners and materials, and then get into the bolts, looking at tightening, tension, and selection. So within this, we'll cover some of the theory, go through some practical applications, look at the governing equations related to some work that I've done, and then talk about some problem solving. Within our Module 10.2, this is where we're going to take a look at Chapter 11 in our textbook, and that's where we're getting into our rivets, welding, and bonding. So we'll go through different types of rivets, different materials, applications for that, look at the welding process, talk about some, within the welding process, the static, axial, and direct shear loading, then talk about our static torsional and bending loading, talk about some fatigue considerations as we're dealing with welds, then get into some brazing and soldering and talk about some adhesives. So again, within this year, we'll cover the theory about the above topics, look at some of the governing equations, talk about some practical applications, and go through a hand solution to a problem from our textbook.